to have you guys on today. I'll end the poll in just a couple of minutes. Lots of folks are still logging on. Want to give them a chance to participate in that. So March 15th, man, it was the beginning of what I've been kind of calling in my own brain the Great Disruption. I don't think I came up with that term myself. Haven't heard someone say it, but surely someone else has called it that. But man, the world changed about as fast as Thanos snap. I don't know if there's any other Marvel fans out there. And we've just been dealing with the aftermath of that ever since and trying to chart a new course for the future. There's been some pretty interesting data that's come out lately. Half of all churches, 49% of all churches have declined since the Great Disruption started. And that's even when combining their in-person and online attendances, according to Barna. And out of that 49%, half of those people, so 25% of all churches, are down significantly. About half of pastors report that building a hybrid model, sort of an online, in-person ministry paradigm, is one of the biggest challenges that their church is facing right now. And to be honest, a lot of pastors are just in denial. I regularly encounter churches and church members who think that everyone just needs to go to get over it and just go back to normal. The flaw in this assumption is that what was normal pre-COVID was actually working. And let's be honest, a lot of times it wasn't. So we say this a lot on our team, that a crisis doesn't create problems, it just exposes them. The world was already skewing digital, and most churches were tragically behind in adapting to the digital world and creating a way of doing ministry and doing discipleship in a way that acknowledged our new digital world. It's not new. It's been around since the mid-90s, but it's been evolving since then. Even big churches, to be quite honest with you, were missing the mark on what defines a good digital strategy. Others have suggested that the Great Disruption is actually a good thing. I know that sounds crazy to those of you who probably signed up for this webinar, but a lot of folks are kind of seeing this as like a proverbial sheep from the goats kind of moment. They suggest that like the losses that churches are experiencing right now are just a shaking out of the true church. I've seen several comments. I've gotten several comments lately in our social media stuff that are basically like good riddance to the folks who have left churches. And certainly while God promises that our faith is going to be tested, your job as a pastor or church leader isn't to be fatalistic. We have a mission from God to go and to reach our community with the good news of God's grace and forgiveness. So let's let God be the judge, and let's let you be the missionary. And that's our goal today in this training. It's to help you and your church be on mission when you're online, so that your church can make and mature more disciples. So today we're going to cover 5 key strategies to boost online engagement and finally, hopefully, begin to bridge that gap between an online and in-person ministry and do that well. I'm going to go ahead and hit end on the poll when we finish our introductions here of myself and AJ. And so if you haven't participated in that, now's a great time to go ahead and hop in and do that. But for those of you who don't know me, my name is Scott Ball. I'm a lead guide at the Malfers Group. You know that it's me because I'm wearing the same shirt as in that picture. We match. And I partner with churches all across North America, helping them find hope, develop a strategy, and make a difference. I'm a native Texan, but I live in Tennessee with my family. And listen, I'm looking forward to a Super Bowl winning season for the Dallas Cowboys. And that's pretty much everything you need to know about me. AJ is joining me today. He's going to chime in from time to time, but he's also moderating our chat and the Q&A for us as well. AJ, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. There's me with a different shirt on. I've got more than one shirt in my closet, Scott. But and I'm not a native Texan, but I live in Texas. So we have quite the opposites going on today. It's always my pleasure to do ministry with Scott and the rest of our team. And we're excited that you're joining us today. So yeah, like Scott, I mean, both of us travel all over the country working with churches. In addition, I've had the blessing of working with church leaders in South America and Africa, and we just love engaging with the leadership of the church. And so it's our pleasure and blessing to bring this content to you guys today. Thanks for joining us. And again, if you have any questions about anything that you hear, put it in the Q&A. I'll be glad to address those as quickly as I can, and either writing back to you, or Scott or I may address that now or later in the webinar. So, but we'll have plenty of chance to interact. And you can always email us as well, leadership@malfersgroup.com, and we'd be glad to respond to you that way also. And we also have a lot of information just on our website at malfersgroup.com. But that's about it. Let's get on with it, Scott.
Hey, will you open us up in a word of prayer before we get started?
Absolutely. I'd love to do that. Let's all pray. Thank you, Lord, for this time that we can be together, God. Thank you for your church. Thank you for the mission that you have us on to bring the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ to the nations. And we thank you for all these leaders that are with us today. God, thanks for the technology that will allow us to connect near and far together. And we pray that this will be a blessing to your church. We pray for inspiration for your church leaders. And we pray that your mission will not be delayed. And that because of their efforts, God, the lost will be found, and those that need to hear the name of Jesus will hear it from their lips and from those in their congregations. We pray blessings over each and every one of their churches and their ministries. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Listen, let's dive straight into 5 ways to boost your online engagement, okay? The first one is to determine your measure for success. This sounds very simplistic, but I actually get this question a lot. It may be one that you have as well. How do we know that we are winning? It's very difficult to boost what you do not measure. So one of the foundational reasons that churches are struggling right now with their online engagement is that they haven't defined what successful engagement looks like. And so they're just chasing a whole bunch of different metrics, which sort of disperses your energy and doesn't make you very good at any of it. So let's just kind of reframe this in terms of health. So imagine for a minute that you said, I want to get healthy. And healthy could mean a lot of things to different people. Healthy could mean, do you want to achieve a certain weight? Are you aiming for a target BMI? Are you defining health simply by how you feel? Is it measured by how many glasses of water you're drinking or how many steps you're taking? Maybe you think health is determined by your cholesterol numbers or your blood pressure or your resting heart rate. There are literally hundreds of health metrics, I think, and all of them have their uses. But to simply say, oh, I want to be healthy, without putting any boundaries or definition to that statement is setting yourself up for failure. And likewise, I think churches have chased, if your church has chased like 5 different disconnected metrics for online engagement or worse, you haven't selected anything specific at all to measure, then you're set up for failure. I literally just today on Facebook, saw someone commenting on this very topic actually, and they said they kind of mapped out this very specific formula they had. It was like, video views times, average watch time divided by something, to carry over the number. I thought, holy moly, what does that even tell you? And how can you possibly track that? And so it's not particularly helpful. So it's really important that we decide, what does successful online engagement look like? How are we going to measure that? And then we can build a strategy to boost that measure. Otherwise, we're just to say, oh, we want to have better online engagement is so vague, you'll never win. So there's not necessarily one best metric, in my opinion, for online engagement. There are some bad ones. And so let's cover the 2 bad ones. The first one is video views. I hear this a lot from churches. They say, and even some of you may be feeling like, hey, our online engagement is way up, because you're seeing the number of views you had maybe pre-COVID, or if you weren't streaming at all pre-COVID, and now you have a certain number of views. That doesn't really tell you anything, which is the same as video impressions, which is also a bad metric. A video impression is just how many times the video showed up on someone's feed. It doesn't tell you whether or not they watched it. Video views, Facebook at least counts that as a view if you've watched 3 seconds, which most of you, I'm sure, already know that at this point. I don't think that you should consider this even attendance. Attendance online is better termed attention. And attention, when it comes to online, can be bought. We're going to circle back to this later. But imagine being able to pay $10 every Sunday, and 1,000 people would poke their heads into your building for at least 3 seconds. that on Facebook, that's what boosting your videos literally does. It guarantees that a certain number of people are at least going to poke their head in for 3 seconds and check out what's going on, and then they may leave. You can't count that as attendance, and you also can't consider, man, we're doing a great job, because pre-COVID we would have 100 views, and now post-COVID we have 300 views. That doesn't mean that 300 people, I know churches do this really weird math on like, well, actually, we know that some of these are just 3-second views, but if we take the 100 number and we figure that there's 5 people or 4 people on average in a house who are watching this, that's actually, all of that math is just stuff to make you feel like you're doing a good job. And at the end of the day, all you're telling me is that you've boosted the attention that you're getting online. That's not telling me that you're actually engaging and making and maturing disciples through your online service. So instead, we need to choose a metric that shows that a person took a step towards discipleship. So let me give you just 3 examples. These are not the ones you need to use. You should come up with one that makes the most sense for your church, but here are just some examples. One example is to target the number of new people who start a Facebook Messenger conversation. So we'll talk more about this in a little bit, but you can use a native service within Facebook to make connections with newcomers rather than sending them off Facebook to fill out a form. So if I'm watching your stream on Facebook, I can tap the little message button to send a message and start a conversation with your church to give you my information to tell you that I'm new, for example. And Facebook can track that information, and you can even export that information into your CHMS. So there are ways to just use Facebook to curate those connections. And so if you were to target a certain number of new connections each week, that would show that people didn't just watch your service, they took a step towards deeper engagement. Similarly, the second one would be like a targeted number of new people who fill out a digital connection card hosted on your website or hosted somewhere else. So it's the exact same thing, but instead of a Facebook Messenger conversation, we're tracking digital connection cards hosted on your website. This is a helpful option when you don't want to have a digital connection card for Facebook and then a different one for YouTube, or if you're using Church Online. This gives you just sort of one central digital connection card, regardless of the platform that you're using or multiple platforms that you're using. But you might say, hey, we want to get 10 new digital connection cards per week, or you've got to scale that to the size of your church and your expectations that are consistent with, maybe if you're getting 0 right now, going from 0 to 10 per week might be a lot. So you might say, hey, we want to get 3 per week, or we want to get 5 per week. Another one that I really like is a target percentage of people who filled out a digital connection card who register for a growth track or membership class or a newcomer class or something, or the online version of those things. And this would really show movement. So if your church is already getting some momentum in gaining some connection cards, 30% of you said that your online engagement or online audience, at least your attention has grown since Easter. That might mean you're already getting some digital connection cards, in which case you shouldn't just be tracking that. Now take the next step. Say, how many of those people are we converting into taking their next best step? They're signing up for the newcomer event, they're signing up for growth track, they're signing up for something else to show not just that they're willing to give you information, but they're willing to start getting more involved or learn more about your church. The key thing is that you set a critical number, and you just one critical number. And this is the one number that you choose that indicates positive progress. It's the one thing that you say, this tells us if we're going fast or if we're going slow. For example, when I'm driving my car, I've got a miles per hour speed limit. It's 50, I need to know if I'm going 45 miles an hour, well, let's say I'm going 60 miles an hour. Is that fast or is that slow? It depends. If I'm driving 60 miles an hour in my neighborhood, I'm reckless and should get arrested. If I'm driving 60 miles an hour on a highway in Texas, I'm probably going to get, run over by somebody else, right? Because the speed limits are 80 miles an hour, right? So you need to know, you got to have some one critical number that gives you an indication, are we going fast or are we going slow? It doesn't mean this is the only thing you measure. It just means this is the thing that determines your measure of success. Are we going fast? Are we going slow? Churches that have 15 different metrics that they're trying to track will never win. You have to have one metric, one critical number that you say, this tells us if we're winning. It doesn't mean you can't change it. You certainly could, but I'd set something that you would keep for at least 6 months, or really ideally a year, that says this is what winning looks like when it comes to online engagement. Here's a bonus tip. Your critical number might be a lag measure. For example, if you said, I'm trying to collect 5 digital Connect cards per week, that's a lag measure, meaning it either happened or it didn't. On a Sunday morning, I cannot really influence whether or not those connection cards come in. I can only measure at the end whether or not they came in or not. So that would be what we'd call a lag measure. Instead, so you can then pair that critical number with a lead measure, which is something that you can influence in real time. Think of it like a lever. So for example, if we were to determine in your church, in your online stream, that there is a correlation between number of comments on your Facebook live stream and the number of connection cards that we get. Like we see, hey, if the more comments we get, the more likely we are to get people to fill out a connection card. So you might then set what we would call a lead measure. This comes from 4 Disciplines of Execution. It's a great book if you have the time and want to read a book this thick. A lead measure would be like, we want to target 15 comments per service. And that's something that you can actually influence, because you can be commenting on there, you can be reacting to what other people are saying and really start good conversation. That is something that you can actually influence real time. So that would be a lead measure. Hey, we're going to target 15 comments per service so that we can hopefully collect 15 digital Connect cards per week, which would be the lag. So that's kind of a bonus hack. If you do nothing, just set one critical number. For the strategy number 1, I want to say the most important thing you need to do is to set one critical number. I'd be interested to see in the chat, maybe AJ can take a look at that. Have you set a critical number? And if you have, what is it? And do you feel good about it? Do you feel like it's something that really is showing movement and progress towards discipleship, or are we just prioritizing attention? How much time or how many people are watching?
Yeah, Scott, let me jump in. There was a question from John on tips about even getting people to fill out a connection card online. And I know this is something that we've heard a lot. This has been a question that we've discussed a lot of times over the last few months. So, and I've got a couple things I would say about that first off, and then let us know what you think too, Scott. But first of all, mention it a lot. So it needs to be mentioned. It needs to be asked of people at the beginning, at the end, and then a couple times in the middle even. So one time is not going to do it. You've got to ask several times for people to do it. My other answer to that is incentivize it. Just like you would, hopefully a lot of you would do this, in person pre-COVID. Maybe you've got a gift for guests that you give. It's a coffee cup or a $5 Starbucks card or something like that. You can do that as well. You may want to even have a separate card for like local attenders online versus remote attenders, because of course you would like to at some point be able to engage in person with local attenders. So, but incentivize it with something. Maybe it's a download that would be attractive, but some kind of a gift also can certainly help with that, just like you would do in person.
That's right. I mean, it can be really helpful. It can be as simple as saying like, do you want to download today's sermon notes? Sorry, I'm talking like it's on a podcast. If you want to download today's sermon notes, click here and then there you put it behind a little gateway that has information. You might think that's crazy, but I literally saw Andy Stanley just do this a couple of weeks ago when they were announcing their plans moving forward. They're like, if you'd like to see a detailed plan of how we're going to handle things, you can download the PDF. Just go to this link. And you went there and you type in your information. I mean, they're collecting information on folks when they're giving away this stuff. So just get creative. People don't mind, generally speaking, giving that information, or if they do, they'll do it when they're ready. Like you haven't earned it. If you can earn their email address and their name, they'll give it to you.
Yeah, keep it simple at first. I mean, you don't need to know all the details about their family and everybody's birth dates and everything that, takes them 15 minutes to fill it out. A name and an email is all you need, because that's all you need to follow up.
Sure. If you can get a phone number, it's great, so you can
Yeah.
text them. All right, number 2, maximize your platforms. So once you know what your critical number is, you need to maximize your platforms to achieve that critical number. So it all starts with having a goal. This is just basic strategy planning 101. You have to begin with the end in mind. If you don't know where it is that you're trying to go, you're never going to hit it. So, but once you have that end in mind, you've got to reverse engineer based on your platform. So each online platform is a little bit different, and they each have their strengths and their challenges. For the sake of this training, we're going to talk through the 3 most common social media platforms, being Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. And I recognize that a lot of churches, and you may be included in this bunch, are using things like the Church Online platform, or even some other really proprietary service that streams just to your website. And I don't think this is the majority, but I'm aware that this is the case for some of you. A year ago, I would have told you that your website is your church's digital front door. That's something that's really common phrase that people say. And that's still true. It is the part of your church that people can find when they're Googling for churches, or when they're just digitally browsing, looking for churches. There are still instances where your website would be a person's first encounter with your church. But if your website is your church's front door, social media is the kitchen door. And the Great Disruption really turned most people into Kimmy Gibbler from Full House. And everyone, or almost everyone, is coming into your church through the kitchen door. They're not starting at the front door first. They're coming in through the kitchen door into social media. So even if you are streaming your services natively on your website right now, I'm going to assume that you're also putting that content on social media. And if you aren't, I'm going to assume that starting next Sunday, you're going to start doing that after this training. Because if you're not on social media with your services, chances are you're not being seen. So doing that one shift alone is going to boost your online engagement. So let's talk briefly about each one. YouTube is largely a passive platform. 30% of YouTube video content isn't streamed on a mobile device. It's streamed on a smart TV, or projected out onto something else. They're not watching it on their phone. And when families watch services online, I think that there's even a greater chance, like higher than that 30%. I think it's probably 50 or 60, maybe 70% of people who are watching your services on YouTube are not watching them on their phone on YouTube. They're watching them on their TV at home. And so what are the implications of that? The implication is you cannot expect YouTube to have the same level of interaction in the comments as Facebook. So your call to action, like your digital connection card, needs to be something that can be done easily on a digital device, separate from your live stream. So if you're, taking the time to put in a card, in the upper right corner to tap on to fill out a digital connection card, I'm not saying don't do that, but just don't expect a lot of interaction from that, because most people are watching if they're using YouTube to watch services, they're doing it on their television, and they're not going to click a card on their smart TV. They're watching there. So it needs to be something that they're doing on their phone. You just have to know that the level of comments and interaction there is going to be much lower. People treat YouTube like television with a comment section, and they're just not as likely to engage there. And you have to know that and kind of plan around that. Facebook is the exact opposite. Facebook demands interaction. Comments and reactions on your videos function as social proof. So if I've watched in preparation for this webinar and in just all the work we do with churches, I've looked at a lot of church streams, and let me just tell you, a lot of them have almost no interaction, very few likes, very few comments, and I know that can be tough to generate, but I got to tell you that they function as social proof. So if a video doesn't have very many comments or shares or reactions, people are less likely to stay engaged with your live stream. So if you want to boost conversation, you need to instigate conversation. You can't treat watching church on Facebook like watching church in person. Talking isn't rude, it's critical. You need at least one moderator logged in as your church. You're probably already doing that, who's commenting, replying, posting throughout the stream. But I would try to enlist a few volunteers as conversation starters, like real life people, not the church, who are reacting and adding commentary. This is a really critical point. Women are 10% more likely than men to engage with your church online. They are. They're 10% more likely. Statistically, they're only about 3 to 5% more likely to post comments, generally speaking, but men are less likely to be logged onto the service in the first place. So rather than kind of figure out, well, how can we change that? I would just lean into that reality, let women be the conversation starters, but recognize that men will chime in also as those engagement numbers start to increase and more people are watching live. So because Facebook is built for engagement, I think your church is likely to get a higher return on investment in flooding energy and resources to boost your engagement there. This doesn't mean I wouldn't host services on YouTube, because I actually think it is a better experience for people who are already connected to your church, because they're sitting there with their family and they're putting it on in their living room. They don't need all that connection because they're already connected. But in terms of reaching new people and trying to engage new folks, Facebook is the place where you're going to boost that. So I'm talking with churches right now who they still are only putting their services on YouTube, or they'll link the YouTube video later on Facebook. That is not the same. You can't expect to get good interaction when you post a link to a YouTube video on Facebook. It needs to be streamed either live or later as a native video within Facebook if you want to get that good interaction. So this doesn't mean I wouldn't host services on YouTube. I would, but you'll have to work multiple degrees harder to get the same level of social response on YouTube as you do on Facebook.
So Scott, so if they're not going to live stream to Facebook, would you recommend then running it as a premiere later? Sure. so that it can be handled like a live?
That's right. Yeah. Schedule that premiere and then stream it and pretend like it's live and have a moderator on there. Don't just hit premiere and then let it go. Treat that premiere like a live service and moderate and get good engagement and promote that on Facebook and boost that on Facebook. And so you can start to reach more folks. Let's talk briefly about Instagram. I would say, generally speaking, Instagram should only be tackled by churches that have a good handle on Facebook and or YouTube. Like, I think it's like, it's next level up. So if you're like, man, we are still struggling on Facebook and YouTube, I wouldn't even try to, reserve your Instagram name or whatever so that you've got it, but then I wouldn't mess with it. But if you feel like, man, we're gaining some traction, some momentum with Facebook and with YouTube, then take on Instagram. And I think there's really two ways to maximize Instagram. The first is to use stories to show sort of behind the scenes of your church. People love behind the scenes. They really love BTS. I love it. So show people walking into the building, film a 15-second clip of your church worship team praying pre-service. Get some footage of the hospitality team brewing coffee. Get real close up on that coffee, and it's hot, and people love that. Catch the pastor either before the service or after the service with either a response to or a teaser for the message, and then promote where people can watch the full message on Facebook or YouTube. You can use a service like link in bio, all one word, link in bio, to permanently place links to your Facebook video library, YouTube channel, your website, your digital connection card. That way you're not having to constantly go back and change the link out in your bio. You have one link tree or link in bio and use that service to just permanently host those links. Just kind of another side tip I'd say with the stories, one thing that I think would be really helpful is if I'm trying to debate, should I come back to church in person? What I don't see when I just watch your live stream on Facebook is I don't see what it's like from the audience perspective, like what it's really like to be there. So when you're shooting video of people walking in, I can see, are people wearing masks or not wearing masks? When you show, when you're filming a story on Instagram and you're showing me the people sitting in there, I can see how far apart are people actually sitting. When I look at, you can show me what's going on with children's ministry. Do I feel like that's safe? Then I can make an informed decision, because I go, okay, all right, well, that's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. It's not as crowded as I thought it was going to be. People are wearing masks. That makes me feel good. Or people are not wearing masks, and that makes me feel good. And, in 2020, you never know where people are at. But just, those kinds of things can help. So there's a real net benefit to Instagram. I just wouldn't try to tackle it if you haven't got Facebook and YouTube down, but it can definitely boost your online engagement, because it makes people feel like they're part of something. That's stories over feed. So you could just post stories and never post anything in your feed, to tell you the truth, and you would get good engagement, because people just they don't swipe through their feeds anymore as much. They're swiping through their stories. So I think stories are really good. People don't do stories on Facebook, so don't even bother trying to add your stories to Facebook. No one cares. Just use Instagram. The feed feature, use that to show short clips. So you get 60 seconds. That's the limit on a video on Instagram. So I would try to do shorter than that. Like, find the best 20 seconds. Add subtitles so that because a lot of times people don't have the volume up. So add the subtitles. Run that 20-second clip. You can upload the full message to IGTV. I wouldn't bother. It just doesn't have the same kind of viewership that Facebook and YouTube has, and that's just going to take up more time. If you want to tackle that, by all means, go for it, but I wouldn't invest a ton of energy there. Recommend add that call to action in all of your clips. So when the clip starts to end, throw up one more slide at the end of it that says, fill out our digital connection card, link in bio, something like that, so people know. Some general notes on streaming that are going to help you regardless of the platform you're on. Number one, don't ignore digital audiences while you're preaching. So you need to look at the camera by default. That's a shift. I've watched a lot of online church services, and most pastors, most of you watching, you're doing this. The camera is on you and you're doing this. I'm preaching, and I'm never doing this. I got to tell you something. Your in-person crowd is less likely to notice that you're looking at the camera. Like, they're not going to be like, oh man, he's looking at the camera. He's not looking at me. Like, I'm never watching someone on stage going, I wish he would look at me. But your online audience notices that you never look at them, because all they're looking at is your face. And so if you never look at them, it feels like I'm watching something that's happening somewhere else that I am not a part of. Mm-hmm. It's a totally passive experience. But when I look, imagine if I was doing this whole webinar today like this, and I never looked at you, you'd think, well, there must be other people in the room. I can promise you there are not other people in this room right now. AJ's in Texas and I'm in Tennessee. But imagine I was doing that, you would be like, he's never looking at me. But I got to look at the camera. So don't ignore the digital audience while preaching. In fact, I think it should be your default. And then when you're preaching and you're standing here talking, hey, today we're talking about John chapter 15. I want you to open up your Bible or your app to John chapter 15. And I love this. I love this image of, Jesus being in the vineyard. That's when I'm moving, and when I'm pivoting, that's when I'm looking at the audience. Then when I stand still, I go back to camera. It's helpful then, if you have multiple cameras, to have the red light to know which camera is on. So when you're looking at the camera, you're actually looking at the one that's on you. So this takes a little bit of skill and a little bit of practice, but you can do it, and it makes a huge difference. If you want to boost your online engagement, you have to look at the people that you are talking to. Number two, have an online audience specific host. Now, this requires a little more technical know-how than if you're a church of 30 or 40 people and you're like, this is not something we want to tackle. Totally understand. It's easily doable if you use something like Ecamm. If you're on a Mac, you can use something like Ecamm. There's a number of other things you could use if you're on a PC. We don't need to go into the weeds on that. But you could you can pre-record it. So you're switching between this pre-recorded introduction and commentary with a online only host, and then switch over to the live feed from what's happening on your stage. It is a technical challenge. It's not impossible. Even a small church can do it if you wanted to do it. But it really makes a big difference if there's a specific host for your online audience. That way, your digital call to action is really clear. Hey, thank you so much for joining us online today. When I ask you to fill out our digital connection card, we're giving away a $5 Starbucks gift card to everybody, to every new person who fills out a Connect card. All you got to do is click the link that's pinned in the comments, or if you're watching on YouTube, it's listed there in the description. Let us know that you are here today. We'll send you that gift card. We really appreciate you, which is something that you can do directly to them, and it's not getting muddled by your in-person audience and what the call to action to them. Now, if you're not in a place where you can technically manage 2 different hosts, then you have to make sure that your in-person host does a good job of managing both audiences. Hey, welcome to First Baptist Church. We're so glad that you are here with us this morning. If you're here with us in person, there's a Connect card right in front of you. If you'll fill that thing out, and if you're a guest with us, place that in the offering basket as it's passed, or if you're not doing that, place it in the offering basket as you leave today. It's the only thing we would expect from you as a guest, or come by, whatever your language is there, bring it by the hub and we've got a gift for you, and then turn and have the host look at the camera. If you're joining us online, we would love for you to fill out our digital connection card. We have a special gift that's just for you too. If you'll take just a couple of seconds to fill that out, let us know that you're watching online. We can't wait to send that gift to you and start a connection with you. Something like that. So they can look at the audience and then they can look at the camera. They got to manage both.
Yeah. Scott, let me mention, because Sarah just asked if that could be, if the host can be done through Facebook comments. And so I think this could be a point of confusion because there's a lot of different ways that hosts can be a part of the online stream and interact. So the first example that Scott gave would have been a pre-recorded message by like your online campus pastor. My church has an online campus pastor. Every week he pre-records a message welcoming the online audience, and through, the technical wizardry of the software back at the church, they can run that stream of him speaking and addressing the audience, and then using like a digital video switcher, they switch over then to the live feed when you then join the live service. Now, alternatively, you could have certainly multiple moderators or hosts, whatever you would want to call them, in Facebook comments to manage written comments and interactions, or also, as Scott was saying, somebody that's still live and addressing the online audience who is also maybe in the room. So I hope that kind of maybe clears up different ways that a host can participate in the online experience.
And Sarah, both. You should be putting it in the comments and be saying it live or saying it in video. Like, you should do both things. Number 3, this is a hard one to talk about. It's always a tough one. But I was joking with AJ when we were putting this material together. I said, he said, well, they don't pay us to not tell them the truth. And I said, well, this is free. So in this case, you didn't pay us and we're still going to tell you the truth. Your music can make or break your live stream. I know that might be really difficult to hear. I've watched a lot of online church. A vast number of churches just haven't figured out how to do the musical part of their service well online. The music might be fine in person. It might sound fine. And I know this because I worked for a number of years doing creative arts and led worship and all kinds of things. So I get it. I know that what you're hearing in person doesn't sound the same when it's recorded and online. Online, it's catching every imperfection, every wrong note. The mix isn't right. There's all kinds of challenges. It's very difficult to do it well. But I'm just telling you, people will tune out permanently from bad music. So a new person is going to cringe and they're just never going to show back up. An existing person, someone who's gone to your church, they're going to just choose to not turn on the service until the sermon, right? I've been guilty of this. I've been like, service starts at 9:30. I'll be tuning in at 9:50. And so that I'm just catching the sermon because it's just the sound's just not. And what that means is a lot of folks just aren't going to turn it on at all. There's no concrete data on this that I'm aware of, but it's safe to assume from anecdotal evidence that online worship either needs to be great or it shouldn't exist at all. You would get higher engagement, seriously, if you had a sermon only stream, like that you had a welcome and then it cut straight to the sermon, and then and then whatever other parts of your service, that just didn't have the music. Then if you had a good sermon and bad music, if there's bad music, doesn't matter how good your sermon is, people are just turning it off. They're just turning it off. I want you to hear it. Because this, I don't think, I double checked the registrations, and this is not from anybody who's watching. I've blurred the background so you don't know what church this is, but I want you to hear it. I want you to hear it.
I worship you are here, mending every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, meeting every need. I worship you. I worship you. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness.
I'm turning
Get us out
that
of our
off.
misery, Scott, please.
I'm turning that off. I'm just telling you, and I'm a believer. I'm a committed believer. I'm a growing Christian. I'm not listening to that. They are not bad musicians. Like I know that guy who's leading worship is a good singer, and I bet in the room that does not sound bad. I bet that would be my guess, because they're not massively off pitch, but you're gonna hear every off pitch note. The mix isn't right. The guitars are too loud. The drums are not mixed right with the vocals. It's a mess. And I'm just telling you, people are turning off your church during the music time. They are. They're like, yeah, I'm not listening to that. So if you can't do it great, I'm not saying do a sermon only. I'm just asking you maybe to consider it and A/B test it. Try it for a couple weeks. You have your people who are going to be like upset if the worship's not there and the people are streaming online. A good way to handle this, I worked with a church actually that did this. They separated out the worship from the sermon on YouTube. So people could, if they wanted to watch the worship, they could watch just the worship, and then they could go on to the sermon portion. So there are ways that you can manage that for the people who are like, no, I don't care, it's bad, but I really want to have it. I don't know. I'm just saying to consider it.
Well,
Regardless,
at least go back and listen to your own. Well, I mean, watch your own replay. A lot of people haven't done that. I mean, you're consumed with getting ready for Sunday. You get up there, you make it happen, and you haven't gone back and actually seen what it sounds like. So listen to your own.
Yeah. I know that there are probably some of you thinking, man, that's really spiritually immature for people to not want to watch a church because the music is bad. Yeah. Well, I mean, the people you're trying to reach, they are spiritually immature. They're acting their spiritual age, right? So you can't get mad about it. I mean, it's like saying, man, babies poop their diapers. That's awful. It's really gross. Yeah, they're babies. So you can't get mad that people are tuning out because the music is bad and say, well, that's spiritually immature. They're spiritually immature.
Yeah.
So they're acting their spiritual age.
Mm-hmm.
Last point here, A and AJ already made this point, but you need to repeat your call to action multiple times. People tune in at different times. You can't ask them once at the beginning of the service to fill out a digital connection card and expect a good response. We talked about pinning a comment with your call to action. I actually tuned into Elevation, the replay of their service, and they had pinned the comment and the link wasn't working. So this happens even to big churches. You want to make sure that you pinned the comment with the link and it works. You need to place a lower third graphic. You're doing that probably already with your sermon notes. Put the call to action in the lower third to multiple times throughout the service to remind people to fill out that connection card. Don't worry about that annoying people. If it's the first time they've seen it, they're going to notice it and they're not going to be annoyed by that. If it's the third or fourth time they've seen it or that they've heard it, they'll either finally act on it or they'll just ignore it. It will only feel repetitive to you. So feel free to repeat the call to action multiple times and put it up visually multiple times. All right, that's number 2. Strategy number 3.
Hey, Scott, let's hit a couple questions here before we move on so that we're kind of still fresh in this.
Sure.
So any options for free online connection cards? So, any like a pre-made off the shelf thing that people can use? Most churches usually just create a page on their website that you can link to, but I don't know of anything that people are using off the shelf.
Google Forms. I mean, if you're looking for something completely free, just set up a Google form. It doesn't need to be elaborate. Just set up a Google form and you can, put that into Sheets. Those of you, trust me, and there are ways you can elevate the use of a Google Sheet. You can set up automations to go from entrance from a Google Sheet straight into a CHMS. In fact, for those of you who signed up for this webinar, a lot of you, when I said, hey, do a one-click registration, you clicked, and then I had an automation set up to put your name and email address in a Google Sheet. And then that Google Sheet was then connected into an automation that fed straight into a Zoom registration. And all that happened without me doing anything. You clicked a link and all of that happened. So
yeah. So let me take a minute here also, because somebody just also asked, an example of a good digital connection card, or, and also maybe any examples of churches that are doing this stuff well. So we're talking, even this webinar is about a paradigm shift in the church. It's what we've been experiencing for months now. You may need to spend a little bit of money, and I'm not talking a little bit of money, to invest in somebody that can help you do this. Maybe you're super small church, and that's fine. We get that. But there's a website called Fiverr, Fiverr.com, where there are tech people that will do stuff super cheap. You could probably get a connection card made for $10 from somebody, and save yourself hours of trying to figure out how to do something. So there's a lot of these little things that you could outsource, even hiring a consultant just to help you with a lot of your online production, or music. Somebody just also asked about, what about a church that struggles with their music ministry? That would be a topic for another day. We can't really get into a lot of details on that, but, and certainly email us and we can talk about maybe some things to suggest to you on that. But if you need help in a particular area that is really important now, then I suggest investing in it so that you can move on past that and be the best that you can be.
We're helpful. We're happy to help connect you with people who can help. So just send us an email, leadership@malfiersgroup.com, with the specific challenge you're facing. We know good people in each area, and we'll get you connected. But in the digital connection card space, and that sort of we're going to talk about automation in just a minute, but Texton Church is doing a great job. I think they have a conference coming up this week that's free, that walks through this stuff as well. You might want to check them out to help with that particular solution. Anything that you can use that's going to integrate with your church management software, though, is generally my advice, so that you don't have to duplicate work. But we'll talk about that here in just a second. All right, strategy number 3, and don't worry, these pick up pace. I know we're watching the time. Personal connection trumps good content every single day. And good content really matters. I just proved that with a video clip to you. But that personal connection is going to trump good content every single day. So success for small and mid-sized churches hinges on accepting one key reality first. Your church, if you're a small or mid-sized church, will always be at a disadvantage when it comes to production value and social exposure. That's just a fact. Elevation has more money than you. North Point has more money than you. So if you view churches like Elevation or North Point or whatever the largest regional church is in your area as competition, you're never going to gain momentum, because you're never going to be able to outdo them when it comes to the production value. Likewise, if you were just to throw in the towel and say, well, we might as well just not do anything and not care because we'll never be able to reach the people that those big churches reach, you're never going to realize the full potential that you have. God has uniquely positioned your church to reach your Jerusalem. And to reach your whole Jerusalem, you're going to need to prioritize connection over content. So the key to long-term success is to streamline your worship service preparation. You need to spend as minimal amount of time as possible getting Sunday ready so that you can maximize your time and invest a disproportionate amount of time into making connections with individual people and with your community. Prior to COVID-19, most churches were investing under 20% of their budgets on ministries, not including their weekend worship services, like children's ministry, discipleship ministries, student ministry, community outreach ministries, those kinds of things. If you want to boost your visibility online, you're going to need to boost your visibility in the real world. And that might mean sort of a realignment of how you're spending time, money, and energy. So every regular attender, so you can do this, I think, in two ways. Number one, every regular attender must have a relational connection. Depending on how well you've maintained your database, we'll talk a little bit more about database in a second, but this will take old-fashioned detective work. Is every person on your active roster connected in a group or a class or a one-on-one discipleship relationship that's currently meeting in person or online? And if they are connected to a group, are they actually participating in that group right now? If they're not, you need to leverage your group and class leaders to re-engage those individuals. So if Barna's research rings true, then as much as a third of your church, 33% or so of your church, has totally disconnected from the church. They're not doing anything. You could instantly boost your online or your in-person attendance by simply reconnecting with those people individually and asking them to come back, asking them to connect to something. And again, use your group and your class leaders to assist in that reconnection process. But you have to know who's attending and who's not attending, who's engaged in a group and who's not. Number two, you need to be visible in your community. There are more needs today than ever before, and your church can get a leg up and boost your online visibility by being known in your community as making a difference. You need to get active in your local schools, which have massive needs right now. When I mean in your local schools, you probably are not allowed inside, but with your local schools, maybe. Get active with your local schools. Step up to provide food and assistance to those struggling with job loss. Create space for virtual learners that are kids of working parents. There's an endless list of ways that your church can be active in the community. And when you increase your visibility in the community, people are more likely to seek you out online, first of all. And if they come across your content online, they'll actually watch it. They'll stop because they know who you are and they trust you. So boosting your online audience is not 100% a virtual strategy. Prioritizing connection over content will help to boost people's engagement with your content, because when people believe you care about them, they begin to care about what you say. So strategy number three is use the physical meet space, those connections, to boost your online audience. Strategy number four, leverage automation. We've already talked about this a little bit. You have limited limited resources, and your most kind of like restrictive limitation is time. There's only 24 hours in a day. So if you want to maximize where you invest your time for connection, you need to know where you don't need to spend time building connection. Really fast, I just want to take a look at scripture, Luke 15:4. What man of you, having 100 sheep, if he lost one of them, does not leave the 99 in the open country and go after the one that is lost until he finds it? Did you catch this? I know you've read this hundreds of times, especially if you're a pastor, so it's easy to miss, but let's look again. What man of you does not leave the 99? Generally speaking, when we use this parable to talk about the amazing love of God and that he leaves the 99 just to find the one. In fact, there was a really popular song last year that called this kind of love reckless, I think, right? But this is not the premise of the parable at all. He says, what man wouldn't leave the 99?
The default.
Yeah. The point of the parable is not about the oddity of a shepherd leaving the herd to find one sheep. It's about the emotion we feel when we find something that's been lost. So why can the shepherd leave the 99 and it not be reckless? It's because there's a fold, there are boundaries, there's an expectation that the 99 are taken care of while he goes and finds the one. This is what a good system can do for your church. Good systems help your church maximize where you invest your limited time for connection. Most churches today, especially after COVID-19, have some sort of a modern church management system like CCB or Church Center Online or Breeze or one of the many others, but most churches are barely leveraging the capabilities of their CHMS. When we partner with a church, one of the things we work on is mapping out systems, weaving in the automation capabilities of their specific CHMS with the actions that only people can do. But by creating this system, we've created a boundary line to know who are the 99 that are taken care of and who is the one that we need to spend some one-on-one relational time trying to go and get. Right now, churches are wasting time, energy, and effort because they don't know where they should leverage their limited time. So if you want to boost your engagement and re-engage people who have disconnected, you need to be able to identify who specifically has disconnected. Additionally, if you want to get better engagement moving forward with guests and newcomers, you need to leverage a system that includes good automation that will help you identify who's taking next steps on their own. Think of that like they're walking the game trail that you've sort of made for them to follow, and who needs more personal follow-up. Okay, they signed up for the connection card and then they signed up for this newcomer event, but after that they didn't join a group or whatever. Where did they fall off the map? And at that point, that's where they get that personal connection. But so long as people stay on that game trail, they're in the fold. They're in the 99. We don't have to worry about them because they're following that discipleship pathway. Fortunately, the time constraints that we're really under right now don't give us the ability to walk you step by step into how to build a systems map that fully leverages your automation capability, maximizes your leaders. But let us know if you'd like to help with that. We help churches out with this all the time. It's one of the things that we do best. Strategy number 5, last thing. You need to have a bias for discipleship. Far and away, the biggest barrier between you and your church engaging more people online and in person is the lack of a clear biblical strategic framework. I was recently working with a church, a bigger church actually, up north, and after walking them through our strategic envisioning process, the pastor was astonished. He said, I honestly don't know what we were doing before this. It's like we were stumbling through a room in the dark. And the executive pastor said it was the most empowering investment of their time that they'd really taken since she'd been on staff. So having a clear framework for ministry will streamline your effort, maximize your team, and help you focus on what actually drives your church to make and mature disciples. Way back in strategy 1, I mentioned that online attendance is better termed attention. And that attention can be purchased for just a handful of dollars a week. You can buy more eyes on your worship services. But if you don't have a clear biblical strategic framework for making and maturing disciples, you're going to be no better off than you are right now. Mm-hmm. If you had more eyes on it, it doesn't going to mean you're making more disciples. Mm-hmm. There's 5 components to a biblical strategic framework. The first one is a Great Commission mission. A lot of you may already have this, or you may need to, blow the dust off of it and actually start living it out. The second one is actionable and biblical core values. You have to really look at your motivations of why you do things as a church. And if it's just to get attention, if it's just to get views, if it's just to get that, that's not going to work. If it's to maintain the status quo and we're not going to change the music and we're not going to do this and that and the other thing, you're never going to make disciples. You've got to have a biblical and actionable set of core values that define what discipleship looks like. The third component is a streamlined discipleship pathway. A huge reason why a lot of you are not getting better online engagement that's leading to discipleship is people don't know what their next best step is. If I wanted to engage with your church, what would that even mean? And what would that look like? How could I do that? How difficult is it? Is your church like a family? And it's really hard to break into a family unless you adopt me, right? What are the barriers for me actually engaging with your church? If it's really hard, I'm not going to do it. And if you've got 1,000 things going on in your church and you aren't investing your people into having them take their next best step in a discipleship pathway, they're not going to do it. So it's really critical, especially right now in this post-COVID world. Number 4, you need a compelling vision. You have to believe that the future of your church is better than the past. You got to think that their best days are ahead of you, not in the rearview mirror. And a lot of churches have glory days they're trying to recapture instead of relentlessly chasing a compelling vision for the future. And the 5th thing is you need achievable 1-year strategy objectives. A lot of churches maybe even have the first 4 things, or at least they think that they do. But what they're really lacking is a strategy for moving forward. They're just wasting a lot of energy and effort. And they don't know what is it that we should be focusing on this year. What are the projects? Who's going to do it? When are things due? Who's going to move on these things? And when you don't have that actionable and achievable 1-year strategy objectives, all bets are off in terms of your effectiveness. It's not going to happen. So even if your church has 1 or 2 of these things that are working, all 5 items in the framework work in tandem. You really need all 5 working together in order to make and mature disciples. The problem is that strategic planning is really expensive. It can cost thousands of dollars to bring in an outside process, plus hundreds of dollars for their travel if you're working with a guide. Some consulting groups take 6 months. I'm not going to name any or more. And at the end of that 6 months, they still haven't even gotten into teaching you a pragmatic implementation process. And we think that's ridiculous. Your church deserves a process to help you shape your future. And it shouldn't take running a capital campaign or dipping into your church's reserves to afford that. More than that, we believe that your church leaders like you are capable of leading your own churches. Certainly, churches benefit from having an outside guide. We love working with churches one-on-one, and it's hard to sort of replicate that perspective that an outside person can give. But we believe in you. We believe that you have what it takes to lead your church into a new era of effectiveness. You need the tools and a process to help you get there. So Church Revitalization University delivers our strategic envisioning framework that we use with churches in person all across North America, but it's in a fully digital format. It's a fully digital strategic planning process. You get all of the first class training from our team that we use with churches across the country. Plus we teach you how to use our tools and our workshops to get the most out of your church. Before the webinar started today, I had a poll running asking if your church's engagement has declined, stayed the same, or grown since Easter. And the vast majority of you said that you have declined or stayed the same. And pre-COVID, the vast majority of you, 70%, were declining or plateaued prior to COVID. So do you have the confidence that the processes that you've been using up to now will be effective in helping your church make and mature more disciples in the future? We want you to be able to sleep at night knowing that you have a clear and biblical and effective strategy that consistently delivers a kingdom impact. We want to bring unity to your church. We know a lot of you are dealing with really sort of disunity about what's the future look like, and we should do this and we should do that. We want to resolve some of that, and we want to eliminate the frustration and the exhaustion that we know you guys are experiencing right now. So we have 2 thank yous for joining us today on this training. The first is every person who registered for this webinar today, we are going to sign you up for a free preview account at churchrevitalizationuniversity.com. Some of you may have already done that, and that's awesome. But some of you maybe haven't yet. So we're going to do that for you automatically. You should get an email this evening with your login information. And that gives you a chance to just kick the tires on it. It gives you full access to the whole introduction module and then previews of every single session. So you can see when we talk about mission, when we talk about discipleship pathway, when we talk about values, all these different things, you can kind of see what that looks like. And early bird pricing on Church Revitalization University goes away for everybody else at 11:59 p.m. tonight. But to give you plenty of time to check it out, we are giving you an extra 24 hours to check out churchrevitalizationuniversity.com. So you get a 24-hour extension on that early bird pricing, which saves $250. This is the lowest cost you can get this year. After tomorrow at 11:59 p.m., the price goes back to normal pricing, and there will not be any other coupons of this amount for the rest of this year. So, and there's a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk to you. If you don't like the process, you think it's garbage, whatever, we'll refund it. We're a nonprofit organization. We're not trying to make a buck off of you. We want to help you. There's never been a better time for a strategic planning process. Yeah. You shouldn't wait. The question we get a lot is, shouldn't we wait to do something until things are back to normal? No, you shouldn't wait until things go back to normal because that day might not come, or at least not like you think it was. And even if it does, normal is what set 70% of you guys up for plateau or decline. So we want you to find hope, develop a strategy, make a difference. Your church can boost your online engagement. And more than that, your church can make and mature more disciples. We'd love to help you with that. We've gone over our time by 5 minutes, and I appreciate you guys hanging on. I will hang on to answer any questions you guys have, but want to just let you know, you'll get a follow-up email tonight that has a link to this replay. It's going to have information about Church Revitalization University. And I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you have questions, we'll answer them now. But if you need to hop off because you got to head to your next meeting, totally get it. Love you guys. Thank you so much for joining us. AJ, are there questions we need to answer?
Nothing pending right now. We'll just give another minute or so here. If anybody does have anything that you want to ask or talk about, then we're certainly happy to do that. If not, again, you can hit us up offline at leadership@malfersgroup.com. And of course, we've got a lot of information on the website at malforsgroup.com as well. Yeah, otherwise, thanks so much for joining us. This one, Scott, is there any software to help with Facebook analytics?
That's a great question. Honestly, the best thing to do would be to take the time to actually just watch Facebook's pre-made videos to help you understand the Facebook dashboard of things. There's nothing that's going to give you more information than Facebook itself. And I would recommend just taking the time to dive deep and learn what do these different terms mean. Once you have a good handle on the terms, because that can be confusing, then you should be able to open up Facebook and it'd be like reading Greek. Once you know what the words are, you can handle it. They have built-in stuff, and I would just watch those. YouTube is your friend. I wouldn't spend money on that. I would just try to do a little bit of self-knowledge, self-examination.
And how about right now, Adrian said their church is just using Google Sheets and Google Forms as like their management system. So what software, what are a few name brand software for small churches, Scott, for CHMS?
I absolutely love, and there's no affiliate such situation here. I really love Planning Center, or the Church Center Online, I think is the banner name now. I love it. The pricing flexes with your size, and I love it, Adrian, because of the workflows that you can use. So it's got deep automation options, and it integrates with almost everything. So I would really look hard if you feel like you can afford it. I would look at the Church Center Online platform. I think it's the best. Yes, someone asked if there are notes available. Yes, you just go to malforsgroup.com/webinar workbook. malforsgroup.com/webinar workbook, and that will take you directly to the PDF with all the notes. But Richard, we will also send that in the follow-up email. So if you don't want to grab it right now, you'll get it tonight when you get your email.
Yeah, and I just posted a link on there as well. Somebody early on said they were having trouble with that link. It looks to be working for me, but I also put a direct link right to that PDF. But as Scott said, you'll get it followed up in an email.
AJ, as we wrap this up, are there any points that you feel like we missed?
No, I don't think so, Scott. I think we crammed a lot into an hour and 5 minutes. Yeah. So I'm sure a lot of people probably your heads are spinning, but that's okay. Download the webinar workbook, and then you'll get the replay, so you can go back and you can fast forward through any of Scott's 5 strategies to help you back with that. And of course, we welcome your emails with questions after our time closes today.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. A lot of you hung on here even through the questions, and we appreciate that. Again, you'll get this replay today in your email tonight, along with, hopefully, if everything works, speaking of automations, if everything works correctly, you guys should get a login to the Church Revitalization University free preview account. That should be coming at you today as well. Love you guys. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.